very much. Thanks everybody for coming out. I think we have a pretty good crowd despite the fact that we had an inch of slush. And I wasn't really expecting a good sized crowd, but I'm happy that all you showed up. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. So we have Julia and Dusty James here from Radish Rye. So thanks for joining us here on the How It's Built on the Burg series. People may know you guys as the Harrisburg's Green Grocers, but we're interested here in this series in talking about your business and finding out how you got to this point and sharing some of your wisdom and your experiences from years of running a small business in Harrisburg specifically. So the first question I have for you guys is bring us to the point where you began Radish and Rye. Like, what interested you in having a grocery store and selling groceries in Harrisburg? Tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you guys to this point.
Go ahead.
It was just an accident.
It was an accident, yeah. I'll just say quickly, I think that, our interest in it, it was really a confluence of our interest in food generally and trying to, just in our personal lives, had a pre-existing interest in trying to deal directly with farmers whenever we could. And we saw a little bit of a hole in the market, I think, for, we were doing a lot of driving directly to farms, which takes up a lot of time and whatever, compared to just being able to go to a grocery store. And then also just really wanting Harrisburg to be the best place that it could be to live. We sort of wanted a store to exist that would be the kind of store we wanted to shop at. So,
because neither of you really had a lot of experience selling groceries before, correct?
Zero.
Yeah.
None.
Okay.
Neither one of us ever worked in a grocery store even.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did you do before?
I was the business manager at the Circle School, and I qualified for that by having an English degree. So relevant in terms of working with small business, small nonprofit and a small business are very similar. But in terms of formal training and any of that, nothing.
Okay. And Dusty?
I started as a young adult, I worked in restaurants, in kitchens, cooking, so I have a little bit of a background in the culinary arts, I guess. And then just sort of accidentally got into construction jobs because of the flexibility that afforded me, and ended up doing that for a long time, 15 years or something. And then this opportunity sort of came up, and and we had an existing love of food, and so.
Yeah, so when did the light bulb moment happen that you actually decided, you went forward and had this discussion, hey, let's open a grocery?
Well, so the story starts long before we had anything to do with it, really. I think it was in maybe 2012, there was an opening for the market manager position, and I was interested in that, and I always say, thank goodness I didn't get it. But during
at the Broad Street Market, to be clear.
Yeah, at the Broad Street Market. So during that phase, I had applied and I was talking to some people who were working there, and Dusty and I were doing a lot of brainstorming about what do we want to see at the market, what would we enjoy, and this idea of a place that kind of pulls together the best of what's available locally from different farms and producers. I don't know, just came out of one of these sit on the porch drinking sessions. And we, as Dusty said, we had been building connections with farms for several years, and had a lot of products that we would love to get our hands on in an easier way than was the case at the time. So we had that idea. I did not get the job as market manager. And I don't know, we never thought we'd pursue this as a business. But a friend of ours did. And so we actually wound up buying it from him as a going concern. It was very, very tiny in those early days. And
this is in the Broad Street Market.
This was in the Broad Street Market, yep. So we bought it from him after it had been in operation for maybe a little over a year, and rebranded, expanded. And at first we thought, well, the market's open 3 days a week. This will be like a really
Part-time
intense
job.
hobby. Yeah. We had no expectation that it would like make money or that it could be our livelihood. We just thought like, we want this to keep going and we're the people who can do it. But we both, I think, really fell in love with it. And despite our lack of any like formal training or experience in the area, I think very quickly both felt like we've been training for this our whole lives. And so after it became clear that we were spending all of our time on it, we said, well, maybe we do need this to make money if we're not going to like have time for jobs. And so we said, what do we need to do in order for it just to support us, no staff or anything? And we said, well, we need sales to double. And we thought, well, that's a lot. We'll see how long we can do this.
So what year are we talking here?
2015.
Okay.
Yeah. So by early 2016, we had doubled sales. And then it just kept going. And we were like, whoa, maybe we can't do this by ourselves. Maybe we do need to hire people. So I think it took a while before we had like real employees. But
Yeah. So you started in a certain footprint in the market, and then you expanded
Yeah.
within the market, correct?
yeah, several times. I think when we immediately expanded by maybe like 14 linear feet, 10 or 14 linear feet. But by the end, I don't remember how many feet we had total.
51, I think.
It was way more than double what we started with, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. And so during those market years, what kind of products did you offer, and how did you respond to the community's needs?
We 100% of what we offered was local. So it was all locally sourced. Produce was a huge part of our offerings, and local dairy, local meat, and then also things where the base ingredient might not be local, but it was locally produced. Like, we were right next door to Elementary Coffee in the market, and we sold her coffee beans, which might seem silly, but sometimes you don't want to wait in line for her through her whole coffee thing in order to buy a bag of beans.
Oh, I did that many times.
So it was all local. And how did we respond to
We took a lot of suggestions, I think, from customers or requests or whatever. I think that we always tried to, we wanted the business to succeed. And so we tried to always just be sensitive to, what are people actually going to buy.
We worked really hard to keep prices as accessible as possible. Local food and organic food do not have a reputation for being super affordable. And I know that to this day, what we are selling is not the cheapest food you can buy. We're not trying to be the cheapest food you can buy, but we want to be a good value. And so we have always worked really hard to work with farmers so that we're able to support them while also able to sell the product at a price that isn't too crazy insane, and develop efficient systems internally so that our markup can be as low as possible. And that's been a big focus from day one in trying to really keep an eye on I always talk about it as the triple financial sustainability. It has to work for us, for our customers, and for the farmers that we're working with.
Yeah, what kind of, what happened, what developed that was very different from your preconceptions when you started?
I didn't have any preconceptions,
Yeah.
other than how much time it was going to take and how much I would love it.
You were wrong about that?
Yeah. Dusty and I, we had like a weekend to decide whether or not we were going to buy the stand. And you know what happened in the end. But I think that there were moments during that weekend when it was not clear that we were even going to stay married.
It was a challenging weekend.
Yeah.
But as far as preconceptions, I don't think that we had too many. I looking forward to having like a hobby where I would just hang out at the market 3 days a week.
Well, that's a preconception. So that didn't happen.
Right. Well, at first it very much was. I mean, it was very slow at first. I mean, I could like walk away from the stand. I would work by myself at the stand on or Thursdays and Fridays, and I could go take a bathroom break or go buy water or coffee or whatever, and it would be fine. Like just leaving the stand unattended.
It was just a few months after Andrea had opened elementary at the market, and it was not a good time in the market's history overall. Many of the vendors who are there now were not there yet. They were still years away from being there, and it was really quiet. So yeah, Dusty could work all by himself on Thursdays and Fridays, because I did still have a real job in the meantime. And Saturdays were tight, but the two of us could do Saturdays together. By the time we left the market pre-pandemic, there would be 5 of us working on a Saturday there, and we would still have lines to the, down to the doors or whatever. So to be able to do it, I mean, it's hard for me to even imagine how quiet it was in those early days.
Yeah, things changed a lot. I mean, I remember the market in those days and how dead it was. And then just over a course of, I don't know, a year to 2 years, it just gained so much energy and vibrancy, and people started coming.
Yeah, lots of new vendors.
Yeah, there were
came
huge
in.
lines at Radish Rye. I had to wait on a big, long serpentine line that went down the aisle.
So anyway, yeah, it evolved from like thinking like this was going to be a fun way to spend a couple days a week to like this is getting intense. Like we need to like really think about how we're managing this business and whatever.
Yeah, so growth pains, right?
Yeah.
So how did you manage that? Getting employees and stuff. I mean, that's a big step.
I sometimes think I love our staff. We have an amazing staff. Sometimes I think, what if we never hired that first person and we just had this like 3-day-a-week hobby stand at the Broad Street Market?
Gets to be a lot.
But how did we do it? I don't know. It was just like trying things out. Our first few employees did not last long, and we were probably not very nice to them.
I think like a lot of small businesses, we just relied on some young people that we had an existing relationship with to come in and help out here and there. It evolved from there, but that was sort of the first step,
It
like
evolved
just
from
getting
there.
a payroll set up and
Yeah.
whatever. That was kind of feels like a really big deal. And then once you have that, sort of have broken the seal, you have the infrastructure in place, and so whatever. You get your first teenager come in and like help out on a Saturday or whatever, and then as that doesn't work as well as you hoped, then you start thinking about like, well, we already have this payroll set up. Maybe we can hire.
I think the challenges for us were it was our baby, and in understanding like what seems obvious to us that isn't going to be obvious to someone coming in. I think also in understanding that we were not well equipped to teach someone how to have a job. And so, we initially were hiring some people who had never had jobs before, teenagers that we just knew. And we realized like, we're hiring people because we don't have the time to do all this stuff ourselves, which also means that we know we have to train people, but we can't necessarily be starting from scratch. And that was really hard, I think, to recognize how much time it takes to train people, especially if you have high standards and are doing a weird thing that no one else does. I think that was a really big learning curve for us.
Yeah.
Okay, so you grew out at the market, and then you decided, I really want a standalone store.
Yeah.
So
What were we thinking?
I don't know. take us through that process. How did that happen?
Yeah, I think that pretty early on, I said to Dusty, I want a grocery store. I want to have a grocery store. And I think he thought I was crazy. Probably was. But it remained like a pipe dream. And then I think in 2017, we learned about a grant program through the USDA called the Local Food Promotion Program. When I learned about it, I was like, whoa, this is like it was written for us. It is specifically written to increase demand and consumption of local foods, and with an emphasis on bringing fresh food to food deserts, low-income, low-access areas. And so I think that we learned about it like 2 or 3 weeks before the grant deadline in 2017, and they require that you have any critical infrastructure already in place. And that means that if you are doing a project that requires like a building, that you already have the building. And we felt like, well, this is an impossible catch-22 because we're not going to like go lease a building and then wait a year to find out if we got this grant, but we don't have the money to like do the build out if we didn't get it. So we just bought a building.
It's the government's fault.
I just started basically poking around the neighborhood, talking to people in the neighborhood, and got the phone number for the people who own for the person who owns the building that we're now in, and asked him if he wanted to sell it. And he said, sure, I would sell it. I'm like, okay, let's talk, whatever. And so we talked, we came up with the price, and
he was willing to finance part of it.
He was willing to finance part of our
huge.
down payment. The bank wouldn't do the whole thing.
So it worked. The bank was willing to loan us the money because the building also has like apartments, and Shining Light Thrift Store was in the half of it that we weren't planning to occupy. So it was just like perfect that Dusty happened to be knocking on doors and talk to this guy right before he was like ready to retire. And so we were able to purchase this building that was going to carry itself without a huge extension on our part. And it was great that he liked Dusty so much that he was willing to finance part of the down payment.
So you conned the guy, Dusty.
Yeah.
That's such a great
Lesson
Harrisburg.
number one.
Right. That's such a great Harrisburg story. Like just, approaching somebody you don't know, you see a building, and then you talk to him, and suddenly, a couple of months later, whatever, you own a building. And, and you had this grant.
That enabled us then the next year to apply for the grant. So we of course missed the deadline for the first year that we learned about it because we didn't have a building, but it did allow us to apply for the grant. And it was like a full-time job to apply for the grant, not something either one of us had experience in at all. But we figured it out. We had some dear friends who do.
I want to say Julia figured it out. I'm terrible at paperwork and dotting I's and crossing T's. Excellent at that. And so Julia figured it out. It's like a 60-page application.
It was a lot. But we had some dear friends who do have professional experience in grant writing who I sent them like my final draft, and they were like, well, this isn't really how grants work, and fixed some things for us. And then we, bit our nails for 6 months until we got word that we got the grant. And at that point, it was like supposed to be, okay, now you start like the build out. Nothing is ever that easy.
Yeah. Well, so Dusty, you mentioned that Julia was, good at writing grants and et cetera, but then your skills kind of kicked in because you're great at construction. And
right, my construction background helped out tremendously. So we had to do a pretty major renovation in the space, and not only do the renovation, but try to figure out how to finance the renovation. And so I did a lot of the work myself. I basically served as the general contractor, and so I didn't do all the work with my own hands, but I did a lot of it, subcontracted some bigger chunks like the drywall and stuff. And we were fortunate enough to have a friend who gave us a bridge loan so that we could finance the renovation and then basically refinance the building with its new increased value after the renovation. I don't know exactly how we would have done that without our friend.
We were just going to figure it out.
Yeah, just bootstrap it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So the great Harrisburg networking kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's just so Harrisburg, your story.
I think also that the renovation was way more extensive than we thought it was going to be. I think that Dusty in the back of his head was like, I want to gut this place. But we thought, like, we just need to, like, there were some built-in shelves. We just need to, like, rip out the shelves and paint it, and it won't be, like, beautiful, but it will be good enough. But, and we thought because it was being used as a retail space that codes would be okay with that. But they decided to consider it a change of use, which meant that we had to bring it all up to code. And that cost us probably a year and a lot of money.
Yeah, thousands of extra dollars in
So-
architect fees.
So it wasn't just that we thought we would figure it out as we went, and it was this huge project that we thought, like, we can figure this out. It turned out to be a much bigger project than we anticipated when we were at the point of thinking we'll just figure it out. But yeah, we did figure it out, thanks, with a lot of help.
Right.
So you're going along, and construction took quite a while, and then all of a sudden this thing called COVID happened, and I know that really upset the apple cart, so to speak. And so talk to us how you adapted to that, and where you were at that point, and what you did.
When COVID happened, I thought we were just a couple months away from opening the standalone location. The plan up to that point had been to keep the market stand and operate this standalone thing across the street. We thought we would probably like shrink the market footprint and really limit what was available there and keep it like streamlined and easy to staff. But we really wanted to have both. We loved being in the market. So COVID hit, and the lines that we saw pre-COVID were nothing compared to the lines that we saw in like the last couple weeks before everything really shut down. It was incredibly overwhelming. I mean, I don't remember what the percentage jump in sales was, but it was like a 30% jump in sales in 2 weeks. And that was not something we were equipped for, of course. So this is, the same period of time when, like, if you try to place a pickup order at Giant, you can't even get a slot. Like, their website has just crashed because of the demand. And we decided that we wanted to offer online ordering right before everything really got shut down. So we did that. It was awful. It was the worst week of my life. I built the website, and then it broke, like, in the middle of the day on the first day, and it was terrible. So we realized that we had an inventory syncing problem between in-person sales and online sales, and that we could not do both channels. So the market was shutting down, like everybody who wasn't an essential business, which, we didn't have to shut down, but we knew we couldn't do online and in person, and we knew that we couldn't safely meet the demand that we were seeing in person. And so we went to all online. At first we were doing 7 days a week. So we went from like this 3-day-a-week market thing to 7 days a week of curbside pickup. And we were working 100-hour weeks, and most of our staff they were really willing to step up, and they were working 50 and 60-hour weeks. And it was rough.
So that was not a hobby anymore.
That was not a hobby anymore, no. And of course it like completely halted all progress on the standalone store because we were just doing everything we could to keep up with the orders. But luckily that like intensity of the online ordering only lasted a couple months. And then we were able to scale back to just 6 days a week of curbside pickup, and then 5 days a week of curbside pickup. And then somewhere in there, Dusty was able to start working on the building again, except not until we moved into it. So at some point the market said to us, you have to reopen here like normal, and you cannot fill curbside orders outside of market hours. And we were like, we can't, we literally can't. And so we very quickly made the decision to move into this like half finished space across the street and fill curbside orders out of there while we were also simultaneously trying to finish the construction. And luckily most of the construction was done. It was just like build out of like buying the coolers and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a lot.
So what has the storefront location been able to do for you that like the market could not?
We can offer, well, we were offering more convenient hours. In November of 2021, we had like a huge wave of staff turnover all at once, and we realized that we could not. We were 6 days a week at that point, and we couldn't train all the newbies and be open all the hours. And so we were like, okay, we're going to temporarily go to 5 days a week and be open shorter days so that it will, we can cover it all in one shift. And we did that, and we saw no decline in revenue. And so we were like, well, maybe we're just going to stick with this schedule for a hot minute until we feel like it would be easy to open more hours. So that is still where we are. I still have fantasies that we're not too far from being open more hours. But yeah, so it's allowed us to be, I mean, we are open 5 days versus 3. It has enabled us to be more convenient. It's so much more space. We've been able to greatly expand our product offerings. And in addition to so much more retail space, we have half the building is a kitchen. And so we are now baking our own bread fresh every day. That was all dusty. And making a bunch of stuff that varies from week to week, but it's all based on the same stuff that we sell. So it's all like, well, mostly locally sourced and organic ingredients from farmers we know, carrying that thread all the way through. And then more recently, we've also expanded into some non-local foods. And so we're trying to bring our same kind of sustainable, ethical ethos to products that aren't produced here.
Well, you're getting a lot more of my paycheck, I can vouch for that.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Doing what I can.
One other major change for us at the standalone store is, and any of you who've been in the market like in August know that it's like 105 degrees in there. And so we have climate controlled space now. Our whatever vegetables aren't like dying.
Your customers aren't dying.
The customers aren't dying, yeah. So that
Both
was
the
another
people,
major
the
upgrade.
refrigerators, and the vegetables are all happier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've done obviously a huge amount of like pivoting, of course, COVID, but also since you've opened the store, a lot of other things have happened. You know, the supply chain stuff and employee not wanting to work and that kind of thing. So how did you manage to get through all of that? Hopefully it's more settled now.
It is more settled now. It's a lot more settled now. I want to say that in response to the people didn't want to work, when we had our huge staff turnover, a lot of those people were people who had been working through the pandemic and who were burned out. They were with us through the worst of it. And I was so impressed with what they did. But in that moment, if I could have quit, I might have to. So we have been really lucky all along the way to have wonderful help. I do think that having staff is one of the hardest parts of having a small business. And it's also one of the biggest joys because I get to spend my time with these awesome people. But the bringing on staff definitely is a whole new element to everything. So having wonderful people is probably the number one thing. Having wonderful customers. I know that in the early days of the pandemic, we were reading a lot of stories about how awful people were to grocery store workers and everything, and we experienced none of that. We had such an outpouring of love and support from our customers. It was amazing, and just emotionally, I think really kept us going when things were really, really hard. So that if you ever wonder, should I send this person this nice email? Yes. And just really working too hard ourselves. That was the other thing.
Okay. All right. I'm going to get back to the second floor to your product line. You said that you had expanded it into some non-local stuff, and I guess you're going to now expand again. So can you talk about where you're going with your product?
It's a hard question. We've in June we started bringing in non-local stuff, and one of the things we thought was, one of the things I think that is different from us from many grocery stores, especially our size, is that we are working directly with most of our suppliers. And so even when we were very tiny and at the market, I was writing like 30 different checks a week to different suppliers and coordinating with each one of them individually about delivery and what do they have. So I thought, well, we have to work with like a grocery distributor. And nobody wanted to do that. Like, we could not get the distributors to return our phone calls, and they would like, we'd have one conversation, they'd be like, well, I'll send you a price list, and I would get the price list, and it was like, these wholesale prices are higher than Giant's retail prices. Like, this doesn't make sense. So when we brought in non-local stuff initially, again, it's like almost entirely direct with these different like small scale producers, but now across the country and even the world. And now my list of people who I'm ordering from is like 100 or something. And it's a lot to manage, and it has definitely like limited what we can offer. But we just recently finally got routed by a major grocery distributor. And, it's all like negotiating your volume level discount with them. And so there's some things that I still look at their list and I'm like, are you kidding? Like, that's what you want us to pay for this? I could literally go to Giant and buy it off the shelf for less. But we've also been able to, we're towards the tail end of crafting a lineup of stuff to bring in from them that meets our mission of being ethically produced, organic, and affordable. So sometime I think it will unroll slowly over the next maybe even months as we make shifts to our lineup.
Yeah, what kind of products do you think you might be bringing in?
Well, at first, nothing new. It will just be replacing like in-kind things that are on the shelves already. So we're like changing brands of canned tomatoes that we carry, and changing some brands of various things like that. But I don't know. I'm drawing a blank on specific things, Larry. Sorry.
Okay.
Is there anything you're hoping for?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. We offer almost everything already.
You have a large part of my shopping budget. I mean, except for paper products, maybe.
That's
Like,
true. That's true.
I expect you to carry those.
I have thought about that, and they just take up so much space.
Yes, they do. I'm not recommending that.
I don't tell anyone, but I have most of those things on Subscribe and Save.
Oh, okay. I'll keep it a secret.
Thank you.
Have you noticed with your store like a different mix of customers than at the market?
I was worried that when we moved to the store, we would see a less diverse customer base. And I don't think that has been the case. And I have no answer to that. But overall, no, I would say we haven't seen like a huge shift, which is great because I loved our customers at the market, and that was one of my biggest fears.
Okay.
I think our percentage of EBT sales has increased since we've been standalone, which has also surprised me. But I love it.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about how you market yourself. In Harrisburg, I've found that marketing seems to be a dirty word to a lot of businesses. So how do you go about getting the word out and getting people in the door?
There's this local paper called TheBurg, and we like to advertise on that mostly.
I wasn't leading you at all, Dusty. That was totally organic.
That is where the majority of our marketing dollars go. But we, for really until we moved to the store, we spent almost $0 on marketing. And I started, it was all relationship based, really. I started writing a weekly email newsletter, and I think that has been our #1 marketing tool, though it has been less consistent since somewhere around March 2020. But when we moved to the store, we did know that we would need to, when we were at the market, we felt like we were always struggling to keep up with the the organic demand that was happening. And that was all like word of mouth and relationship based, 100%. And we also knew that we're going to have a lot more capacity when we got to the standalone location, that we would need to do a big marketing push. Turns out that takes time in addition to money. So I don't think we have done as much of it as we'd like. But advertising in the Burg, and every time there is an article about us in the Burg, we get a huge influx of people saying, "Oh, I read about you in the Burg." So thanks for that.
That's music to my ears.
We definitely do a significant amount of Facebook advertising, but most of it is boosting the links to the newsletters that I've written. We should probably do a lot more like taking pictures of our beautiful products, but I almost never remember to do that. And I think that marketing is something that now that things are settling, I am thinking more about, but don't have a super mature perspective on.
Something that we've talked about internally many times is that, like, for the first 3 or 4 years of the business, I think it was growing so quickly that, like, all of our effort was just in capacity building. Like, there was no chance that we were going to try to bring more people, because we could barely figure out how to service the customers that were coming just through word of mouth or just from foot traffic in the market or whatever. And so, yeah, we did almost none. And so we knew that there was going to be a transition here with the new space and needing to, like, grow the business further to support that space. But I think it's not fully, the new marketing plan with the new space is not fully fleshed out. But we're getting there.
I'm a huge fan of Julia's newsletter. So if you guys have never read her newsletters, please sign up for their emails, because they'll email them to you, and they're just great. But you're welcome. You get a slice of life. He ties in recipes and food and goods, and it's just great reading. In fact, I think we've reprinted one or two of them in
It's
Burg.
true.
They're that good.
That is a high bar. I am pretty honored.
So where are you guys headed now? I mean, where do you see, the old job interview question? Where do you see yourselves in 5 years? Like, where's Radish Rye going?
I think right now, honestly, we are still just like kind of consolidating after the insanity of the pandemic. And Dusty is no longer at Radish Rye full time, just as of a few weeks ago, because we have such an amazing, solid kitchen staff. He was really pioneering the kitchen program and the baking, and now we've got totally competent, wonderful people in there, which frees him up. And we also have a retail manager now, which has freed me up a lot to start thinking about things like marketing, but also catching up on what is maybe literally like 3 years worth of work backlog. So right now I think, this kind of consolidating, making sure our foundation is firm. And from there, I do really hope that we will add additional days and hours. But I just raised that thought recently for the first time, and Dusty was like, "What?" It's like, maybe like a year from now. So I don't see any like major changes to what Radish and Rye does, but I do look forward to continuing to evolve our product lineup so that it's even better and meeting the needs of our neighborhood and our community. And just hopefully giving people more of what they want.
I think some people come here to hear about, experiences, entrepreneurial experiences in Harrisburg particularly. What advice would you give people if they came to you and said, "I'm thinking about opening a business in Harrisburg, besides don't do it"? What advice would you give them?
I would say think really carefully about what it is that you're offering people. What is your value proposition, and how can you deliver that?
Yeah, I would second that, and I would also add, like, plan on not making any money for a while. Like, you need to. We had already, even before buying this business, we had already set up our lives in a way that it required very little income to maintain. And so we had the flexibility to spend time having like a hobby at the market without me earning much income otherwise. And it continues to be true even to this day through all the growth or whatever, that we could both make more money doing something else. It's definitely not like the most remunerative way we could spend our time, but it does pay for our life. But it's a struggle, and it's not, like
When
we
you're
don't have
working
car
100
payments
hours a
or-
week, it feels like this is definitely not worth it. But yeah, I mean, right, we drive old cars, and Dusty's construction skills meant that we could buy cheap houses. And so we just had already kind of planned on having we thought we were aiming for flexibility. That is not what we got, but it did align really nicely with being able to work for very little pay for that first year in particular, when I would like do the books each week, and then I'd be like, can I take any money? And sometimes the answer was a little bit, and sometimes the answer was hard no. And also both of us having the ability to do freelance work, like just here and there, really helped a lot. Dusty would pick up construction jobs here and there, and I could do some hourly work here and there that really helped. But I don't think that is directly, I mean, I think that is a really good point. Like, I think sometimes, restaurants especially, like we see them open and then close so quickly. And I think that it is really hard to like build a customer base and build a business. And you think like, I need all this money to open the business, but you need probably at least that much money to survive the first few months or year of the business before you have that base built in.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, having started one myself, I think that capitalization is really important. And I've seen people in Harrisburg open businesses, open their door and have absolutely no idea like what they're going to do on day 2 and how they're actually going to attract business and how they're going to support themselves. And unfortunately, reality comes and bites them very quickly because they don't have backup skills. They don't have any backup money. They don't have anything to rely on when things start going south or slow, because it takes a long time to build up a business.
Yeah.
Right.
I
I
think
think it's really easy, I think, to like do some projections, whatever your business is, and to just sort of speculate, like, I'm going to have this many customers with an average spend of this, and like, I can probably get that many customers in a couple weeks or whatever. And you can pencil it all out and, do your back of the envelope calculation and think like, oh, I'll be making money like in month 1 or month 2, no problem. But I think there's so many unforeseen expenses that you probably haven't put into that little calculation. And it's harder to get customers than it might feel like sometimes. I don't know.
I do think another piece of that, like not only knowing what your value proposition is, but also, do people want it? I see a lot of small businesses that are really passion projects, and I love that, and I want those projects to exist. And there might not be enough demand to support like a full-time storefront, and so having a really clear, I mean, everyone will tell you that, right? Like, write a business plan that includes a market research. But I think it's true. It's really important to understand, like, who are your customers going to be? Do they want to pay for what you're offering? And how do I get them?
Yeah. And you may have a passion project, but sometimes that project is not actually monetizable, right? Or in reality. And it requires a huge amount of other skills to actually operate a business, including financial skills, including self-discipline, including a lot of things that you don't think of when you're like, oh yeah, I want to sell these little tchotchkes that I make.
Yeah. The last thing I was pursuing before we bought the business was I was taking accounting classes at Hack, and I thought, I want to be an accountant, and my tagline will be like, because you're a fill in the blank, not an accountant, because you're an artist, not an accountant, because, whatever it is. So that certainly was a skill that has helped in our business now. But I think there's not always a lot of support for really small businesses. You know, the support that's available usually costs money, or at the very least time that you probably don't have. And if you don't already have those business skills, I think it's doubly challenging.
Okay. Well, let's open this up for questions, because I think we've chatted around for too long, and I'm sure we have some good questions here in the audience. So anybody have a question, raise their hand. Yes.
So first, well, I'm Molly. Thank you all. 2 shout outs and then my question. One is, I'm glad that you alluded to the newsletter, because yeah, Julia, especially like during COVID, when you all were just how transparent you were of the challenges and the craziness and ebbs and flows, was just really wonderful. And so thanks for sharing and bringing people in that way. And then Dusty, it sounds like you're not in the kitchen anymore, but your soups are amazing, and I really love them.
Cool.
And so I'm glad we're able to continue. But in terms of my question, we're very thankful that you've expanded and there's things that are not just locally sourced, but like at the end of the day, like the producers and the farmers are so core to your business model. And so I guess I'm just curious more of the stories and connections and the network you have with your local producers, and in particular as you were growing, what conversations were you having with them around expansion plans or like needs in that way, just to connect back to the source?
Yeah, a lot of our early producers were people who we were either friends with or had like sought out looking for food ourselves. And in the very beginning, it sort of felt like we were asking them to do us a favor by selling us their food, because the quantities that we were buying were relatively small. Like it almost certainly wasn't worth their time to drive it into Harrisburg. One farm in particular that we worked with, Village Acres Farm in Mifflintown, they, I think they were doing it because they had the same vision we did. Like they wanted to make the Bread Street Market in Harrisburg a better place, and they had the current farmer's parents had used to come and like set up a stand, you know, like a pop-up kind of thing at the market, so they felt like it was part of their farm heritage. And yeah, as things changed, then it became like, okay, we have to have a meeting every February to talk about what you're going to grow. And that happened. I mean, one of my big projects this week is like making a list of all the stuff that we're buying from local organic growers cooperatives rather than directly from farms, and sending it to some of the farms that we do work with directly to say, hey, here are the things we're buying from co-ops. If you want to be growing these, we buy them directly from you instead of from the co-op. So we do that. I mean, sometimes it's really formal. Sometimes it's just someone saying, like calling me and saying, hey, I'm going to grow cherry tomatoes. How many pints of cherry tomatoes a week do you think you'd want in May? So she knows how many plants to plant. Yeah, I mean, I think Village Acres has been the one where we've done the most deliberate planning. Like, they were supplying us with eggs too, and so there was a period where they couldn't supply us with enough eggs, and so they had to like add to their flock, and that was a pretty big deal. But yeah, it really varies from farm to farm.
Okay. Other questions? Yep.
Hi, my name's Luke. I actually have a pretty big interest in farming. Like that's what I want to try to do once I make enough money to be able to buy my own. I help out at a buddy's farm after work and stuff. And I'm just really interested. I also have like a big interest in local food and everything. But just doing research and stuff, it seems like the market is pretty stacked against local produce. Just the way laws are written, like ridiculous regulations. The way industrial farming has really kind of taken over America in the past 100 years. I was wondering, since you guys said you bought from local farmers, how did you combat that and keep your prices competitive and deal with just, such much more fickle markets where, as you said, like, hey, we can't produce eggs this week, or, yeah, we don't have as much of a stock, How are you able to still remain competitive when you can go to, like, Aldi and buy, if you want to call it chicken, for, like, 50 cents a pound?
That's an important piece of it. We are not price competitive with Aldi, but I think we are at least as good a value. And so I try to, if I go to one of the big grocery stores, I'm always looking at what are their organic produce prices. I know that we're not going to compete with their conventional produce prices most of the time, but I am always trying to see, can we compete with the organic price? And often we are coming in lower than the big grocery store organic prices, particularly, I mean, maybe only for in-season produce, right? So like even as we've started bringing things in from, we call it further afield, I'm looking at like bell peppers. Red bell peppers at the grocery store are so insanely expensive. It blows my mind. So we are not bringing in out of season red bell peppers, but when we do have them in the summer, they're like less than half the cost of what Giant is selling them for. So that is something that I look at, and I think sometimes there are things that it just doesn't make sense to grow around here. On the flip side, that, well, you might never be able to do this. I mean, like you could grow bananas if you were really dedicated and had like a heated greenhouse, but each banana would have to be like $100, and that's crazy, So there's always this spectrum, I think, of like, what are you tackling? What's the value you're creating? Can you offer a higher quality product, or is it something that, tomatoes are like a classic example, right? In order to transport tomatoes across the country, they have to be a variety that is not going to bruise very easily, and it probably has to be picked before it's ripe. And so you will get a tomato and it will not taste very good. We are buying tomatoes only that are grown locally. They do have to make a little bit of a drive, but not like 18-wheeler across 3,000 miles sort of drive. And so the farmers that we're working with are able to grow really delicious tomatoes, and we're able to get them really very fresh. And so they might be more expensive than a grocery store tomato, but man, is it worth it?
So Julia, I have a neighbor who has a banana tree right here in Midtown.
Yeah.
Seriously, so I'll hook you up with him.
Yeah,
please
if he
do.
wants to sell his
And
bananas,
$100 a banana.
Right.
There you go. But,
Right.
I'm waiting for those bell peppers to go.
My name's Megan, and I really appreciate your further afield items, because now I can get everything I need to make chocolate chip cookies, because you started carrying chocolate chips, so I hope that sticks around. I'm curious, with items that are going to go bad soon, I know you have the urgent use items. What happens to them after that? Is there a lot of waste?
We have very little waste, and it's something that we have really focused on from day one, partly in order to keep the rest of our prices low, but it's also part of why we wanted a kitchen. So I think very early on in the history of Radish Rye, we thought, we're going to have all this wilted kale. We'll buy a Vitamix, and like maybe we'll start making smoothies at the stand. Well, we never had enough wilted kale to even think about making smoothies. There was like one bunch, and it's like, well, that's what we're having for dinner tonight. But it never became a thing. So the urgent use program is really successful in getting stuff into the hands of people who are going to use it quickly, hopefully. And we also, our kitchen will like chop and freeze stuff if necessary, or just that will, what we have extra of will affect what soup we're going to make that week. And we've definitely come up with some recipes based on this is what we have. So.
And we also have a bin for staff to take stuff home too, like
Right.
things that like a small enough quantity that we can't really do anything with or whatever. And so after all of those different possible avenues, there's like so little left, but we do compost whatever remains. And we have, if anyone wants to start a composting program, we're looking. We have gone through a number of different iterations. At our old house, we had our own compost pile, so we just took everything home. We sold that house. We do not have room at our new house, which is just right here, practically across the street from the store. So we have done lots of just figuring it out as we go along. And so currently one of our staff is taking it to a farm that he works on sometimes.
So every once in a great while, we will have something of a quantity that seems worth donating, in which case we'll do that. But it's so rare that, we've had folks try to like develop relationships with us, and I have to tell them like it's probably just not worth your time to come down here because we just don't have enough that's going to waste.
So I wait all year around for those big bags of ugly peaches. Those are fantastic.
Yeah.
But I have wondered, and Megan's question, I have wondered what you did with like the bananas that go rotten.
We've had very few. We have urgent use some like really overly ripe bananas, and they go.
Wow.
People want them for their smoothies or their banana bread or whatever.
I'm not sure if this is 100% clear, but by urgent use, she means special them. Like
Right,
sell them
we're
for a
specialing
discount.
them. Yeah.
We call it urgent use. We have an urgent use sticker.
Yeah, sorry. We'll special it. But yeah, we just haven't had, I think 1 week maybe there was like half a case, which to be clear is like 20 pounds. So still not like an overwhelming quantity of bananas. And I think our staff kind of like picked away at them until there were a few bunches that did go in the compost. But yeah.
Okay.
Just not a lot. And those ugly peaches, those are coming from the farm as peach seconds. They're ones where they come off the tree with the pit split or they got bruised in harvest or whatever. So those aren't even ones that would be waste for us, but we are able to connect them from the farm to people
They
who.
may be ugly, but they're delicious.
Yeah.
I love them. Okay, more questions? Yeah.
I just had a question about like maybe other parts of supply chain food. I've read articles like in Brooklyn, there's urban gardens growing inside with hydroponics and all this other stuff. And I've heard there's a shortage of like beef processing things. Like, do you have any thoughts about like okay, we got a grocery store, like what would be the next thing you think would help you or in our integrated food supply?
I think the meat processing thing is a huge one. That is a constant battle. We get our meat from a bunch of different sources, but some of it we try to buy like basically live in essence and have it processed. And I think to Luke's point earlier about the regulations, I think the regulations, especially on meat processing facilities, make it very difficult for there to be small operations. It's just so costly. You have to have a USDA inspector on site and all these things. And so that is I would say, the first thing that comes to mind for me in terms of challenges, that it's hard to get slots at processing facilities. And then when you do, I feel like we're not always super happy with the quality and of how they cut or package the meat. And it has been a hassle and a frustration for us pretty much from day one.
There were some periods during the pandemic when it was especially bad, like farmers just couldn't get slots to have their animals processed. That has eased up a little bit, and there are more shops around here than there used to be. Some states, though, have developed kind of innovative programs because, of course, Dusty's talking about this regulation, and it's certainly something where food safety really matters. And so some states, I think Vermont has worked really hard to try to figure out ways to keep all of those food safety standards while also making it a little more accessible for the smaller guys. And one of the ways they've done that is by having local inspectors instead of just like the USDA inspectors, that they're more able to develop a relationship with and are more accessible to the processors. The other thing I would say is transportation, that there are some organic growers cooperatives that help with that. In Pennsylvania, of course, we have a huge Amish population that's growing, and so they're not driving it to us themselves. But they're able to coordinate. But I think there's a lot more room for farmers and small-scale producers to be working together to coordinate transportation.
Yeah,
in terms of customer demand, you said you're trying to be as receptive as you can to what people are asking for. What kind of dietary trends, food trends are you seeing that maybe you didn't expect, or just kind of like came out of left field, whether it's more people eat vegan diets or specific products like oat milk being all rage now, or sort of things like that? Are you seeing that maybe weren't the case when it was only stagnant?
I don't want to offend anyone at all, but the thing that has surprised me the most is that even though we get constant requests for things like gluten-free flour or vegan this or vegan that, they don't sell. We sell mostly like traditional food, and I now am not very responsive to requests for like niche vegan or gluten-free products or any kind of niche dietary thing, because they just don't do very well.
Not that we don't have a few options like that,
Right.
but we don't have like tons of, we don't have like a dairy-free section or something of all different types of, just a couple staple things, some oat milk but yeah, I think that we have specifically avoided branding ourselves or allowing anyone to brand us as like a health food store. I think a lot of people misperceive that we are that, but we're not trying to be that. We're just trying to be a store that sells good food, delicious food. What's that? Yeah. And so we don't carry much in the way of like niche stuff. And so I think for the most part, people don't ask for it too much.
Okay, any other questions?
I just have one. My name's Rose. So obviously grocery store inflation is like ridiculous right now, and a lot of people are trying to eat at home, trying to do things to save money. So specifically, how did that affect your business? Because it just keeps seeming to go up and up and up. Do you feel like more and more people are coming in because they're trying to cook at home and save money? Has it raised your profits, or do you feel like it was harder to turn a profit and stay affordable because the grocery stores are charging more? What do you guys think about that?
Our prices have gone up a little bit over the last 6 months, but not super dramatically, I don't think.
I think we have been insulated from some of it because we have such short supply chains. And not that, I mean, when we talk about animal products, like all the feed has gone up in price, and everybody's labor costs have gone up. So we're certainly not immune to inflation pressures, but I think we have been a little bit insulated from it. And I can't talk specifically to what. I have no idea whether we see people coming through our doors for one reason or another.
Yeah, but in terms of, I mean, we're maintaining like the growth trend that we have been on or that we expected to be on throughout the inflation, but it's not like, it doesn't feel like it's deviating significantly in one direction or the other. It's just sort of, it feels pretty normal to us, yeah.
I will say it's part of why I'm looking to work with a national distributor who can get us like a generic brand organic canned tomatoes, because I want to be able to offer like the best canned tomatoes you can buy and also some like really affordable, perfectly fine organic canned tomatoes.
I actually have a question on this realm. How about eggs? Obviously, egg inflation has been in the news a lot recently, and I was wondering, since all of your egg suppliers are so local, has that insulated you a little bit from some of those increases?
Our egg prices went up 2 weeks ago, and I think that it's partly so there. Right now, our eggs are coming from the Lancaster Farm Fresh Cooperative, which is all Lancaster County farmers, mostly Amish farmers. And so they're coming from a variety of different farms, but they all have these animal welfare standards that they are required to adhere to. And their feed costs have gone up. But I think a bigger problem is, I mean, not a problem, it's great for them, that as the difference in price between conventional eggs and organic or pasture-raised eggs has shrunk, there is increased demand then for the organic and pasture-raised eggs. And so it's a supply and demand thing. So I think their costs have increased. I know their costs have increased. I don't know how much of it is also just like, well, now the market will bear a slightly higher price. So when I raised our prices in response to their increase, I actually shrunk our margin on them a little bit so that we would be collecting like the same in absolute dollars, but not increasing it proportionate to the increase we were seeing. But I suspect that that price is never going to go back down. Does that ever happen? Do prices ever go back down?
I think sometimes they do. Any other questions?
I don't know if you all mentioned this in the beginning, but are you like originally from the Harrisburg area? I know you said that you lived here now, but I was curious like kind of how that impacted you opening the store here.
Yeah, so for me, I grew up on the West Shore, mainly like in the New Cumberland area. But my grandparents grew up in Harrisburg, like uptown, like I think on Peffer Street and Kelker Street. And so they brought me to the Broad Street Market a lot when I was a kid. And just sort of like fell in love with the market and whatever. I feel like it's been a part of my life from a very early age. And my uncle had a stand there for like 20 years or something. And so, yeah. And I've lived here for the last, I don't know, 15 or 20 years, something.
I grew up also on the West Shore in Lewisberry, and my family was not originally from here, and I have no deep roots in Harrisburg, but I don't know, at some point, like I just really wanted to live in the city. When I graduated from college, I was like, should I go to grad school? Should I go to law school? And finally I said to my advisor, I think I want to just like move to Harrisburg and try to make it a better place. And I didn't really pursue that in a deliberate way until years later, but
Well,
yeah.
you are doing that, so
Thank you. But yeah, we both lived in the city for quite a while before getting into the market thing.
Any other questions? Okay. I just, oh, yeah.
Have you ever thought about being a co-op grocery store?
I have thought about that, and honestly, the administrative hassle of being a co-op or a nonprofit feels to me like too much. Like there would be some benefits to it, and right now I don't have like the wherewithal to not. Right. Yeah. It's hard enough to make decisions on my own. If I have to involve a whole bunch of other people, yeah.
So my final question is, would you recommend that other married couples go into business together?
Oh, no.
I think that we've done pretty well together.
We have. My parents worked together as well, and so I had a model to observe, for better and for worse. It's hard. I mean, it's a lot. And, you know, you see each other all day, and then you see each other at home, too.
And it's the only thing you talk about.
I mean, I don't know that I would recommend starting a business to anyone. You do it because you can't stand to do anything else.
Okay, well, I think on that note, we should bring it to an end. I think I agree with that.